Welcome. My name's Graham Smith and I'm the Chair of the Judges and Officials Committee of the Arabian Horse Society of Australia. We're conducting a series of interviews with worldwide recognised judges and officials to help promote and enhance the training of our Australian judges. Today, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Jacquie Webby. Jacquie is a familiar face to many Australians as she's judged over here on a number of occasions. Like many of us, Jacquie was hooked on Arabians when she was an 11-year-old girl on her parents' dairy farm in the North Island of New Zealand. The reason she became hooked was that there was an ethereal stallion next door, the grey stallion, Sarinth, who came to live there and who Jacquie fell in love with. Soon thereafter, she saved up her pocket money and put her thoroughbred mare Coral Ann in foal. And as a result, Jacquie was on her way with her love of Arabian horses. Jacquie has lived and worked in several countries, including England, Saudi Arabia, and Australia. And in Australia, it was where her Al Dahab stud was first established. But back in 1985, Jacquie returned to New Zealand, at which stage she imported a number of horses, including those bearing the Cameo, Sienna, Aloha, Starglen, and Matthew prefixes. She's had an outstanding results in New Zealand, breeding national champions and reserve champions, and many of her horses have been exported to Australia. Jacquie is an internationally accredited judge for Arabian and Arabian derivative horses and other breeds as well. She has judged extensively in Australia and New Zealand, and as I mentioned, she's judged at our Australian Arabian Championships in Sydney. Jacquie is also the past president of the New Zealand Arab Horse Society and has been a guest speaker and judge at the World Cravat Convention held in Australia in 2005. Jacquie is also the co-author of the Hoofprints in History book published by the Arabian Horse Society of Australia. Jacquie is a journalist by trade, and through that journalistic endeavour, she's been able to write in many magazines and has had the opportunity to visit many studs, shows and events throughout the world. We welcome you here today, Jacquie. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much, Graham, for the opportunity.
That's great. That's great. Good to have you on board.
Thank you.
Look, Jacquie, we'll just jump in with a few questions. Look, you've consistently gained the respect of your fellow judges, both here in Australia and in New Zealand, and also with various show committees, with the way you conduct yourself as a judge. And I was just wondering what you think some of the personal attributes are or skills that you think a judge needs or they should develop during their career. And in particular, we're emphasising for our young judge starting out on their career here in Australia.
Well, my first advice to a would-be judge or a prospective judge is to have a good understanding and a knowledge of the breed and know what makes a good Arabian, how the attributes of the horse before you in a judging scenario is measured against the breed standards. And to ask yourself, and I know that as a judge, when you're in the ring and the pressure's there and you might be judging on your own or you're judging with other co-judges, you have a very small window to evaluate that horse that's in front of you. So you have to have a quick look at how the conformation and the legs and the neck, and you've got to also put aside whether you're an Egyptian breeder or a Cravat breeder. You've got to judge that horse in front of you because you won't know what the bloodlines are of that horse. And so good knowledge, wide knowledge, and to make your evaluation and award your points with an open mind would be one of my cornerstones requirements and advice to a prospective judge. And we now have, I do a little test with myself from time to time because we now have the luxury, if you like, of live stream feeds from all around the world, and you'll be familiar with that. And I'm sure you've judged virtual shows as I've done, and I sit there with my little pad and pencil and do my judging, and then I see how I stack up against other judges. So yeah, knowledge is the keystone. Take advice, ask advice, go to as many shows as possible, And you're also going to be confronted by Mr. Big show person that's there, who you know is quite an influential handler on the show season. He might handle for some of the bigger studs. You've got to put that aside and go in with a clean and clear mind. The other thing I would say, stay off the social media. It's the enemy of people in our profession, because so many people get on those machines and they turn into sort of keyboard warriors. So regardless of whether you've had a good day or a bad day, and I'm sure you'll always have a good day, please don't make any comments to social media after the event. Stay mature. Say, I've had a very pleasant day, great day. Thank you to all the organisers, the committees, the show people. And that's my advice for people, stay clear of that sort of thing.
Yeah, thanks, Jacquie. Look, you've given us a lot of food for thought with some of those responses there. Social media is obviously always topical, and unfortunately, we see it in politics. We see it in many social aspects of our life, how dangerous it can be. I like the fact that you talked about watching live stream and practicing using scorecard as well. It's never perfect, but I do it as well. Last night here in Australia, I was just judging the Dubai show, using the same method. It just keeps your eye in. As I said, it's not perfect, but it's a good thing to do, Jacquie. And again, as you touched on, I think just getting to as many shows as you can, looking at horses. Even sometimes when I go to the racetrack, I'll judge the horses when they're in the parade ring. Doesn't help me pick a winner, but it's a good. You've only got the horses there for a minute or two, and it's a good thing to test your skills and fine tune them a bit. But look, thank you, Jacquie. That was really good. I appreciate your comments, Jacquie, and I think you sort of touched on it a little bit as well for this next question. But how does a young judge start to develop a good eye for a horse? How do we teach or develop that skill for our younger judges? And what can they do to increase their capacity or knowledge to evaluate any horse in a show ring environment?
Well, developing a good eye comes, in my opinion, Graham, with hard work and dedication. Nothing is easy. And knowledge, once you have the knowledge, you should always be building on it. It's just look upon it as putting the foundations for your house, putting the next story in, building knowledge. If you've got Arabian stud that are close to where you live, make contact and talk to the stud owner and tell them your aims and aspirations. You're aiming to be a judge, and I'm sure they'll welcome you with open arms. We always need new people coming through. And ask them if you can visit their stud and have a look at their horses, and ask them how their involvement started and what they see as a good horse. And the other thing I'd say is try to attend shows where several breeds of horses are being exhibited. And in your notebook, just stand on the sideline again and you judge from the sideline and just watch the judge when he or she puts those ribbons on and see how you stacked up. Did you put that horse in first, or did you have it in third? And then try and understand why he did it. I'm not saying go and ask him, but just try and evaluate from the sideline. And then attend the breed shows if you can, the Arabian breed shows in particular. And it's different for you folk in Australia because you have multiple registries. We don't have, for example, Quarabs or stock horses or Arabian warmbloods. We have in New Zealand, we have purebreds and derivatives. They're now called, they used to be called part breeds, but they've upgraded them now to derivatives. So that can be a combination of an Arabian warmblood mare, as I have, but she is rated as a derivative. And so again, have a look and see how the judging is going with those and how you would have placed them. And the other thing I would recommend is to watch your ridden horses, see how they move under saddle and how the conformation affects their movement. For example, the thoroughbred world, you see some of the horses coming to you on the TV and they're flicking their front feet out and you wonder how on earth they're going to gallop. Well, they do. And win. And the other thing is to attend the seminars or the stud open days and to talk to the breeders and the trainers if they're there, and the stud owners, and ask them what they look for when, because they breed numbers quite often, and ask them what they look for when they're choosing their next show horse or show horses. Always be open to learn. And my dad always said, knowledge is very easy to carry, Graham, and I've always used that as a bit of a cornerstone for myself.
Yeah, thanks again, Jacquie. Some really good points. I like what you said about looking at other breeds and, going to different horse shows as well. You always pick up different things looking at other breeds of horses. And also your comments about saddle horse movement as well, and sort of trying to understand how that horse is moving and why it's moving. But yeah, that's really good. I appreciate those comments, Jacquie. And look, Jacquie, you've just crept a little bit closer on your screen. I might get you to move back just a fraction. Yeah, that's perfect, just there. Okay. Look, Jacquie, I guess the next question will be important to a number of our newer judges. New Zealand is always seen as the first stop on their international judging career. Young judges go over to New Zealand to judge either in the North Island or South Island, and for many of them, it's their first opportunity to fly and judge internationally. Now, for me, the pressures are still the same. You have to have a passport, it's a decent trip. There's different, food, culture, and the language is strange at times as well. But it really is a bit of a training ground for our judges and to get them used to more international travel. So I guess I'm just asking, as someone that understands the Australian culture and obviously understands the New Zealand culture, could you talk about some of the differences or some of the things in common that we might have, so in regard to our horses, what a judge might see over there, other breeds, the show program, the culture. So any thoughts around that, Jacquie?
Well, we always like to welcome overseas judges to New Zealand, of course, and what we have done now is we've put together, and I have to admit we poached a little from Australia, we've put together judges' contracts now when we do invite overseas judges to New Zealand, and it sets out, and you'd be familiar with them, Graham, it sets out what we will offer, what we will pay for, the expenses that we will meet. I would say to young judges or new judges that are coming to New Zealand for the first time, make sure your passport has at least 6 months pre-expiry in it, because the customs are fairly diligent on that. Even though we are Anzac neighbours, they do regard, they do like to see a little bit of flexi time on your passport. And when you come to New Zealand, you'll notice that we're smaller, we're greener, and our numbers at our shows are fewer. So those are three of the most important things. To get a class of 6 or 8 at a show currently with COVID and that sort of thing is really good. And but of course we have two island shows every year. We have North Island Championships and South Island Championships, and we have a single judge system at this stage because the competition sometimes only runs one day, so you're very busy. You can start at 7:30 and you get a half an hour for lunch or an hour for lunch, and then you're going through to complete your day with the saddle classes and the costume class. National shows tend to run over 2 days, and again we have usually have one judge system over there. A lot of our we have very few professional training stables in New Zealand. Our main horse breed in New Zealand is thoroughbreds, and we're regarded as a great nursery for raising these young thoroughbreds because of our climate and our grass. So we have a program that runs from the society. It's approved by the society, and it has a minimum schedule, but the show committee are able to add in things like classic head, best walking, best trotting. We quite often do not cut our costume class into 2. We have show and native costume together. And we have our regulations on that it can't be just thrown over the top of a saddle. It has to be secure. There are rules about the length over the knee. It can only reach to just on the knee. So there are a few slight differences with showing. Our first is red, not blue. And so then it sometimes goes down to 4 or 5 in a class. So the South Island has a different scenario with their paced and mannered. They have a best paced and a best mannered. The North Island, when they have the North Island Championships or the national championships in the North Island, we run the two together. So there's just a few changes.
So Jacquie, I might just jump in there. Just on those paced and mannered classes, I was scratching my head the first time I was over there. And I'm always wanting clarification. But how do they relate to the Australian classes? They're a snaffle bit class in which you're judging paces and manners. So how would you equate it to an Australian class?
Well, I guess it's probably more equated to a hack class in New Zealand. You see the horse, how it's relating to the rider, its manner of going, how its manners are in the ring. Obviously, if it's bearing and bucking and everything like that, they come out. You like to see the smooth transition between the paces, Graham.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's fairly well aligned with Australia, but it's just a little bit probably of English inflection there.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I remember I was in my 20s. I think I had my first trip to New Zealand as a judge, and I couldn't stop trying to put blue ribbons on the first horse there. And it's hard to try and remember to stop doing that, but it's a funny little quirk, but it catches you out every time you judge there at some stage.
I have the same in Australia, Graham. I have to tell myself. Yeah. Okay. Blue.
Yeah. You touched on the thoroughbred nursery over there. One thing I found when I go to judge in New Zealand, they will get you to judge in other rings and other classes. And I really love the thoroughbred classes there because the thoroughbreds and the hunter horses there have so much more bone and substance to our Australian thoroughbreds, which tend to be a bit lighter and leaner. It's a nice thing. I love it. But as I said, for me, it was a bit of a shock the first time I went over there, and you had 17 hand jobs that, had 14 inches of bone at least, so it was great to see.
Yeah, no, we're very fortunate because people who breed Anglos, and they are a particular interest to me as well, but unfortunately, I don't believe enough are bred in New Zealand because we have this huge gene pool of mares that are either coming out of their black type production on a stud farm, but are still highly productive, or they just haven't, they haven't made the cut when it's come to being black type on the racetrack. And I think there's just, it's just a pity, Graham, there's not more Anglos being bred. They're some of the most elegant horses. I just love them.
Yeah. Jacquie, I guess as a tourist now, we'll shift slightly away from the ring, but New Zealand culture, I love going there to visit as a tourist, but any tips or any things you think that any judges might need to be aware of?
Well, we've touched on the passport scenario, but I always have a little pack in my toilet bag when I travel overseas, regardless of whether I'm going to stay with people or whatever, because chances are you have a bit of street food. If you're going downtown, you have a bit of a snack here and there. I always take a standard prescription, which you can get over the counter at the chemist to upset tummies, because hey, being prepared, there's no point trying to find a chemist when you're miles out in the country at 3 o'clock in the morning and you're feeling like dreadful. And so I always take that in my bag. I always make sure that if I'm judging overseas, just reverting back quickly to that, I turn off my cell phone, because nothing is worse than hearing a cell phone going in your handbag when you're trying to put a ribbon on something, and you'll find that quite often a lot of our judges will stay over for 3 or 4 days if time permits, and don't be afraid to say, hey, well, I'm in Christchurch. I'd really love to go and swim with the dolphins or something like that. Or if you're an art gallery person, or, just as they say to you, well, what would you like to do? You've done a little bit of research, just say, hey, I'd really like to go and see whatever. I hear there's an exhibition on and I'd really love to see it. And I'm sure that, they would be only too happy to host you.
Yeah. Thanks, Jacquie. Some really good tips there about judging in New Zealand. And also the last point, so I have to say that whatever show I've ever judged at, the committees have always been terrific and very welcoming and very grateful. And they're proud of their culture, which I love as well, the Maori culture and the New Zealand culture. It's you have a lot to be proud of in the way you've integrated, if you like, and brought those together. So congratulations, and thanks again, Jacquie. Some really good tips there.
Yeah, we are a very diverse nation, and I think that people often say when you think back about to dining in the restaurants, the restaurant scene is a whole load different than it was, say, 20 years ago. It was fish and chips and the pie cart and the posh restaurant. Well, now it's a whole different ballgame, Graham. You can virtually tour the world in your city or in your town.
Yeah, exactly. No, I'd second that. Some beautiful restaurants.
And our wine's not bad either.
Yeah, exactly. It's nearly as good as the Australian wine, Jacquie, but,
Yes, I'll take your point, yeah.
And look, the last thing, this is not a tourist interview, but the last thing is the exchange rate. It's usually in our favour. So, it's another reason to spend your dollars in
We're working on that, Graham. We're working on that.
All right, we better get back on track here, Jacquie. Look, the next question, in today's global environment, there are lots of pressures that are placed on judges, and each country and each jurisdiction has differing rules around gifts and hospitality, and also different cultural values. We just sort of touched on that. But how does a judge maintain their judging integrity and respect? And can you talk about what a trainee or probationary judge should do in regard to building and maintaining their integrity as a judge amongst their peers, show committees and competitors?
Well, I think one of the things is to remember, one of the main cornerstones that I feel, Graham, is to remember that no horse is perfect, but they all have their good points. And breeders, they're dedicated to breed and they strive to breed the best they can. And it's unfortunate that there's a minority in our Arabian world, our horse world, if you want to stretch it out, in fact, who find it impossible to say anything good about a person or a horse. And I've always maintained that if you're kind to people, they'll be kind to you. And okay, human nature now and again sort of goes off the rails a tad, but the Arabian is a horse of choice, and we compete against other breeds who've probably got more dollars for their marketing. We compete against people, other ways of spending money, like holidays and boats and cars and things like that. And I think as a judge or a learner judge, you've got to be true to your own. You've got to be true to what you've chosen in the ring. You've got to be you've got to have the knowledge and learn and read and study. And if you're faced with a situation where it relates to gifts or hospitality, where you feel uncomfortable, I always find that the best idea is to say, thank you, but I decline in this stage, but thank you, but no thank you. Do it with a smile, and you should always feel that you haven't upset things by being true to yourself. And I think being true to yourself, if you've got no faith in yourself, well, what's the going forward situation on that? You can always go to one of your JOC members or your AHSA or the New Zealand Council and say, well, look, I was faced with this situation last week. I felt a bit uncomfortable. What would you have done, Jacquie? And then we'll talk about it. And the fact that you're addressing it for these junior judges or the probation judges, they realise that they are uncomfortable and they don't want to be in the situation again, Graham. They want to be able to cope with it, answer it, and close it, essentially. But I think your personal integrity is with you. You've got to, if you feel uncomfortable, seek advice. Otherwise, just if you feel comfortable, just say thanks, but no thanks. Hey, what's next on the program? And just move it on lightly. Don't get into a social media bashing situation. I can find myself, if I'm putting ribbons on horses, I never get into a debate. I just say congratulations, and I say it to all the competitors in my lineup. I don't just say it to one or two. I just say congratulations across the board. And I think, you put a professional view, because you're being brought to New Zealand, or you're being invited to judge at a show because they consider that you have the integrity and the knowledge of the breed that you are judging. And you've got to guard it religiously.
Yeah, thank you, Jacquie. Some really valuable points there. Appreciate that, and I'm sure you've used those through your career as well. And I just noticed your dog's in the background there, just enjoying himself, trying to catch a few rays of sunshine there on the lounge.
Yeah, that's her.
Jacquie, look, you've been fortunate to judge a wide range of shows at the highest levels in New Zealand and in Australia, as I've touched on, and you've travelled the world. And as you've indicated before, you're watching live stream all the time. I guess I just wanted to ask you, what are some of the concerns or trends, and they can be positive, or areas of concern that you may have seen in the show ring that you think judges need to be mindful of? Any thoughts there, Jacquie?
New Zealand probably followed US trends of hard stand-ups and gingering, although gingering to a lesser degree, and a lot of facial makeup. But I think it appears to have died down a little now, Graham, which is good. Personally, I don't like to see horses with excessive face makeup, because generally I come home and my suit's got it down the front, or my shirt's got it down the front. So I think to myself, well, there's some on him and most on me. But I don't make any comment to the competitor about the state of the amount of makeup that's on their horse. That's their decision. They've presented it to me as they'd wished. We also have moves afoot in New Zealand to ban excessive tactile hair removal, around the nose, the eyes, and the ears, etc. That's currently being going through the RAS system, the Royal Agricultural Society, who are our overall governing body in those things. Noise level, sometimes it's hard to put up with, but I think if you go to a football match or something, you've got it there. Race day in Melbourne, hey, you've got it there, and it'll only last for a wee while the class is being judged, and then hopefully that'll sort of die away and the next class will come on. So I think that's just part and parcel. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Jacquie. That's interesting. Look, along the same lines as that, the question I've just asked, could I ask you what your personal views are on what you've seen, or what you're seeing today, about conformation and breeding trends with our Arabian horses? In the introduction, I talked about the range of horses you've bred and the success you've had as a breeder. And again, you've visited lots of studs around the world. Any comments about conformation trends and where we're heading in regard to breeding of the Arabian horse? Are we doing it any favours or injustices?
I think that we're doing it favours, because, and one of the things that I believe has helped with the improvement in our standards of horses has been again a little bit influenced by America in particular, because when I first started to show, Graham, the horses sort of had a bit of a hose off in the cowshed and put on the float and essentially came to the show, and everybody was clean and tidy. But now, it's a real science. It's a real state of the art presentation. And I think that's been good, because when we show, we hope that we get an audience and who are non-Arabian people but are interested, and they see these horses going. that are, you know, clean and tidy. I don't like to see stallions being racked up, you know, facing other stallions. And one of my pet dislikes, I'm afraid, is photographs of stallions with striking out in a front leg. I think that is antisocial, if you can say, for the breed. I don't think it's a good look. But I think that New Zealand originally imported Arabian horses right back in the 1880s and later to improve our horses here in New Zealand. And of course, people rode them in those days and they used them in carts and everything. So, and most of them were crabbit horses. But, you know, since then, people, and bearing in mind that those early buyers, you know, I don't mean the 1880 buyers, but in the 50s, they had to get overseas funds from the bank to be able to buy those horses. So it was a big commitment on their part, and they were committed. And I think that, you know, mares were sort of, and fillies, they were sort of in the big four figures, you know, 8, 10, 12, $15,000. Well, that was a lot of money in those days.
Yeah.
And so AI, I think, has helped countries like New Zealand, bringing in overseas bloodlines. Again, the breeders that have done that, as I've done, you know, it's a heck of a risk. I lost 3 tanks because they were tipped over and the semen was useless on arrival. But you need good vets, and our vets have become very skilled at AI now, frozen AI. And this has helped New Zealand bloodlines broaden and deepen. And so much so that, you know, we've got horses now being exported to places like Sweden, Malaysia, and they're good horses. They're not scrubbers. They're not second-rate horses, you know. So the showing season, the showing scene has changed, and it's changed for the good, in my opinion. I think it's really great. I love to see new bloodlines in the showroom. I love to see new people showing, and I think that if we only get 1 or 2 a year, hey, that's 2 we didn't have last year, Graham.
Okay, that's good. So globalization works for you, especially in New Zealand.
Yes, it does.
I guess, look, counter to that, and this is just a personal view, I just worry at times that people are just buying off a pretty picture on the internet. But if you do your homework, as you said, you know, and you ask questions, ask friends overseas, or do your due diligence. Look, I'm all for it as well, but I just think, you know, sometimes people get lazy and they don't really do that due diligence on a stallion if they're importing semen. But again, my personal view, and I love your view. So thanks, Jacquie.
Yeah, no, can I just continue on that? When
Sure.
I bought my semen out from England, I spoke to the collecting vet over there, who's was one of the authorities, and I said to him, now, you know, let's go into this. And my vet said to me, Jacquie, there's 3 things to ask for when you evaluate a stallion for bringing him out frozen. And I said, okay, what's that? How many mares, how many cycles, how many pregnancies? And that's the criteria that I used with the fellow that I bought out. And bang, 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 there it all was, you know. And surprisingly enough, 3 fillies.
Yeah.
Hey, that was great. But you do your diligence. You ask the questions again. You get the knowledge, Graham. And I do agree with you. We do have people that buy ribbon horses, but then some of them have disappeared now. They've just been and gone, and you know, their horses have either disappeared as well, or they've been exported. A lot of horses went to China. So, you know, some of them went over there. But no, I think, you know, that if people are careful and do their study and do their due diligence, hopefully they'll be all right.
Yeah. Thank you, Jacquie. That's great. Jacquie, I regularly ask judges or breeders what their legacy will be to the Arabian horse. I guess, what are some of the things that are important to you now and what you might want to be remembered for into the future?
Well, I guess they'll probably say to me, what a crazy lady she was. She bought in all these horses. But I live in hope, Graham, that most of us who breed or show or judge, that we do so because of the love of the breed. You know, I think back to that when I saw Corinth in that paddock when I was 11 years old, and he just captured my heart and my mind. And anyway, that was him. And I think that it's important to be honest when you're judging, to be honest with your opinions. You don't have to be forthright in your opinions. You can keep them to yourself if you wish. But those connected with the Arabian breed need to be mindful that there are other opinions from other people that are not necessarily your opinions, and be tolerant, and above all, just continue to enjoy your connection with the Arabian horse and the Arabian breed as I've done, and just go on and keep learning and keep reading. And yeah, I just hope that that's where my legacy will be.
Yeah. Thank you, Jacquie. And look, the last question, I guess we're drawing to an end of the interview, was just about any final thoughts. Is there anything that we haven't really touched on or you'd like to expand on from the interview, that any messages you wanted to pass on to those Australian judges, and in particular, any trainee probationary judges?
Well, first of all, I'd say welcome to the judges sector. And if you're asked to judge, reply promptly, because the organisers are trying to organise their judges, and they like to hear from you whether you're available or whether you're not. And dress for the occasion. You might wear Prada out to dinner, but it doesn't rate in the show ring, because I always have my comfortable flat shoes, and those are the ones I go to, because sometimes, as you know, Graham, you're out there for 7 or 8 hours, virtually non-stop, and it's good to have some comfortable shoes for your appointments. Most judging appointments have a judge's contract, and that'll set up what the invitation to you covers and doesn't cover. Be mindful of that. Don't raid the mini bar and the fridge and expect the host committee to pay for it. Make sure your passport's up to date, and with a little bit of leeway on your expiry, and don't forget about that magic pack of pills in your toilet bag, because being forewarned is forearmed. And lastly, never stop learning and listening, and ask the questions and seek the answers. And I go back to what my old dad said: knowledge is very easy to carry around, and you're always learning, Graham. And finally, above all, enjoy yourself. It's a great excitement, and it's a great breed, and I just love it to pieces. Yeah. And thanks for the opportunity to talk to you judges and would-be judges.
Fantastic, Jacquie. Look, thanks for those final comments. That's terrific, and it's such a great honour to be able to judge when you walk into that ring, and you do feel a lot of pride. It doesn't matter whether it's a local show down the road, pony club, or an Australian championship. You get a buzz from doing it and a great sense of pride. The only thing I'm just not sure of, I've never worn Prada out to dinner. I don't know what you do over in Jacquie. So, yeah, well done on that.
Me neither, Graham, but it's however, your high heels might be fine for dinner, but hey, they won't cut it in the show ring. Well, I've yet to do it myself, though I don't even try.
Yeah. Okay, Jacquie. Well, look, as I've said, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. We really appreciate you giving your New Zealand perspective and what Australian judges might expect when they go to New Zealand. So thank you for that. We hope that when COVID settles down, that we'll see you back over here in Australia somewhere judging. We love having you here. You've got a good sense of humour. You're valued as a judge. You've got a great ethics and integrity, and we love you being part of this seminar series. So thank you again, Jacquie.
Thank you very much, and I can't wait for that bubble to disappear, and I'll be there like a shot.
Okay.
Thanks, Graham.
Thank you.